Hello and welcome to PolyCosm. My name is Christina, and in this video we're going to check out some of the most recent updates in Simply Cloth and go over two major features I use a lot in clothing creation, namely the new template library and the new merge by distance option, which allows you to merge gaps, which is unfortunately quite common in Blender when sewing patterns together. Furthermore, I will demonstrate how to use the new absolutely amazing Simply MicroMesh add-on to, for example, add scales or some spikes to some armor, create some chainmail, and also create some custom tileable meshes super easily and use it for all sorts of shenanigans. Let's get started. So, first thing I wanted to go over was some of the new features in Simply Cloth. If you haven't watched my previous video on this add-on, I highly recommend it as I go over all the menu settings and all of the different uses the add-on has. And in the updated version, you actually now have a template library of sorts, which is absolutely amazing for creating clothing quickly. You of course don't have to stick to the templates, you can edit them as much as you want, but they're basically a great starting point and you have a wide range of choices from belts to trousers to dresses and so on. If you're interested in creating some custom patterns of your own, Garment Tool, which is another add-on, is really good for that. You can basically create patterns from curves and convert those curves to meshes super easily. Links to all of the above mentioned add-ons and videos will be in the description and pinned comment below. If you'd prefer to just use one tool, which I totally understand, I will only be using Simply Cloth for this demo. And I'll show you how you can modify some of the existing pieces in the template library. So you can see now, if you open up a file containing a model, you'll see in the Simply Cloth add-on, by the way, if you don't see this menu, you can just press N. You'll see that this menu now actually has the template library available right away. So you can just press on that and you'll get a range of a lot of options. So you can create skirts, you can create trousers, dresses, headdresses, shirts, pillows, belts, and so on. So actually let's try to pick one of these. Let's see. Let's try to pick a dress and you'll see it shows up right away and we can move that down and try to make it fit a bit better. So maybe move that front a bit like that so it's not overlapping any of the shapes. And we'll probably want to size it up somewhat, maybe like that. And maybe move it down a bit. And just like before, we can choose our different presets. So if you want it to be made out of wool, elastic smooth, fabric, leather, denim, and so on. Let's go for denim and see how that looks. So just press reset, play, and that happens. Of course, I need to make the model a collision object. So you just select the model, press collision, activate, and actually let's reduce these numbers a bit. These numbers basically determine how close to the body the cloth will sit. So if the number is pretty low, that means that it will sit very snugly onto the skin. If you put this number too high, it will kind of float above the skin. So let's set this all the way down, maybe 0.05. By the way, if you hover over the menus, you can see the descriptions. You can see like friction, you can see the thickness. So this is the outer and this is the inner thickness. As for the friction, we don't want it slipping too much. So let's actually turn up the friction quite a bit, maybe 80. And let's go back to the fabric, press reset and play. And it's actually just as simple as that. But yeah, look at that. If we press pause and have a look, it looks great. We can see that some portions, if we go a bit closer, that we have a few holes, but there's a new option in Simply Cloth that allows you to kind of bridge those gaps a bit. So if we increase the merge distance here, that basically disappears. Isn't that great? Oh, except for here. Her thighs are too strong apparently. Maybe if we increase that number. Yeah, what's happening here is that some of these portions are kind of being merged. So if we put that low again, what we can do is we can try to size up the dress a bit maybe, or choose a more elastic fabric. So actually let's choose silk and let's try to run that again. Nope, still happening. So let's reset that. Maybe try to scale it on this axis. Press reset and play. Pause it. That is working, but you can see it's quite baggy now. So actually let's undo that. And let's try maybe on this side, or let's try to maybe, if we choose the lines here. Let's use proportional editing, so you can either press the shortcut O or you can press this button. And if we now try to scale it and of course scroll in so it's not affecting the entire fabric, we can try to size it out a bit here. And then let's reset that, press play, see if that works any better. We can try to reduce the merge distance a bit. So if we reduce that to 0.75, 0.5, yeah, that kind of helps. And it's not affecting any of the other areas, so that's good. And there's a new sculpt cloth button, so if you wanted to kind of go clean this up afterwards, you can just press sculpt cloth and then just try to smooth that out manually. I'm going to try a few different presets and see if we get any better results. And this result is pretty good, but we can see that some of it still isn't bridging the gap. So let's try to increase the merge distance just a bit more. So maybe 0.7. Let's see if that looks okay. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So you can see how these templates are super useful, and we created this in literally, what, 2 minutes? It's amazing. If you want to sort of overlap your clothing, which is always a bit tricky, you can enable collisions on the cloth itself once you're done with it. Just like our DAS model, if you choose the cloth, add collisions, you can create a new piece of clothing and repeat the previous steps, and it will wrap itself on top of the first layer of clothing. I'm pretty sure you can play both animations at once, but this can be a bit demanding on your processor and you might end up with a few glitches, so I find this to be a pretty good compromise. But what if you want the model in another pose, you ask? Well, I actually made a video on just that. In that video, I explained how to install both the DAS script in DAS, the DAS importer add-on in Blender, and how you can keyframe and import any animation from T-pose to a custom pose really easily and add some cloth animation on top of that. So here's that very same model I used with the same animation, and let's add in one of the templates and watch it in action. Let's add in some trousers and see how that works out. To bring this up, and you can see right now it doesn't really conform to the legs, because in the original model here you can see the legs are completely straight. So let's try to modify the trousers and hope for the best. Actually, let's push this animation a bit further out so it gives the trousers a bit more time to settle. So let's push that out to maybe 100. And now let's maybe try to size up the trousers. And let's try to play that again. So reset and play. So here I was just trying to tweak a lot of the settings, trying to kind of size up the trousers, size them down, kind of rotate them, Because these apparently were women's trousers, I kind of had to bridge some of the gap on the crotch, and I also raised them so they were a bit more high-waisted, because when he bends over and the trousers kind of go down, it's just gonna fit his behind a bit better. So as you can see, I had to do a lot of tweaking, and you can still kind of see his buttocks poking out. But I think this is honestly the closest you can get. Obviously, you can convert this into a mesh where you can like sculpt further, and you can kind of bridge these gaps. You can maybe bring this up, you can make it a bit more of a tighter fit, and use the cloth sculpt brushes to kind of make this look better. So this is maybe a good starting point, but then obviously you would have to go in and tweak. So you can see, like, even with a dramatic pose like this, it actually works fairly well. It's just you kind of have to do a lot of work on top of it. But as for the settings, if I just go through them, I chose to do cotton, and I chose to hook on self-collision, so I wanted to make sure the cloth wasn't colliding with itself, and clipping. And as for the quality, I set that pretty high and the collision fairly high. As for merge distance, I really had to like get in here because I could see the gaps here, and just like incrementally like increase the number until I got it looking somewhat decent. You obviously don't want to put this number too high, because if you do that, then you're going to see a lot of other places start merging together. You're going to see these folds disappear basically. As for the sewing, I chose to kind of set that high and to decrease the speed, so when the cloth pieces come towards each other, they don't come at each other like too fast and too violently, because if they do that, then you get a lot of visual glitches. And I also chose to kind of bring our animation up a bit further. I didn't want to wait too long every time to test and see if it worked. But yeah, you can obviously like tweak this as much as you can and get it as realistic as you want, but I think this is probably kind of the best you can get. If you want really realistic results, I would highly recommend getting Marvelous Designer, which is specifically designed for this kind of thing. But yeah, most of the time I just kind of need like this simple overlay that's covering the body, so when I add in lights, I can kind of see how the light like generally hits the fabric and how the fabric kind of reacts depending on the texture and shader and so on. So for me and my purposes, I don't really need something super detailed and something super accurate, so this pretty much just works for me and my illustrations. Alright, that pretty much wraps up the new features in SimplyCloth I use the most, so let's jump to MicroMesh, or simply MicroMesh, which I am so excited to talk about. This is honestly an add-on I've been waiting on forever. It is so simple, but oh my god, is it effective. What it basically does is it takes any mesh and converts its surface to tiny meshes. To show you what I mean, here's a cube and let's subdivide it a bunch of times. Now if I press the Add MicroMesh button, magic will happen. And the beauty with this add-on is, just like with SimplyCloth, you have a wide library of meshes that you can use or even modify if you wish, and you can even create your own and use that as a micromesh. How freaking cool is that? I thought a good example would be this piece of clothing I super quickly modeled for an illustration. It's not even fully closed and it's just done really shittily. Shittily, is that even a word? In the final illustration, if you zoom in, you can see that the chainmail isn't very convincing at all. In Blender, I basically just overlaid a chainmail texture on top and turned the material to metal to get some correct lighting information, but it just looked horrible when you zoomed in. It's so typical, but a couple of weeks after this illustration, the creator of MicroMesh released the add-on, and I was just like, god damn it, this would have been so perfect to use. So let's try to rectify my mistakes. So the original idea was to kind of have this like gambeson with the chainmail on top. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, maybe size it up a bit, and then I'm going to go to Simply MicroMesh, here we go, and press Add MicroMesh. And ooh, that is way too big, so let's actually size that down and size it up a bit. If you hold shift, you can kind of get like finer control. As you can see, the meshes are pretty sparse. So what you have to do to kind of increase the density of the rings is to kind of increase the subdivision modifier. So what I have now is 1. Let's actually increase that to maybe 3. Press apply, and if you press the recalculate button, it'll recalculate, and this looks so much better. Let's hide the original source mesh up here, and let's press off overlay so we can get a better view. And let's try to size them down so they fit a bit better. Let's see, holding shift, we can get a bit finer. There we go. So now most of the rings are connected. And you can see here, even in the armpits, it's being calculated pretty well. And the best part is, once you're kind of satisfied with the density and the rings, you can obviously change them if you want. So you can change them here. Let's do maybe, oh yeah, I really like this. Let's zoom in and maybe try to scale them down a bit. There we go. And if we now go into sculpt mode, we can actually change the shape and it will be automatically calculated and correct. So to show you what I mean, if we choose some parts that are kind of popping out, yeah, here it's kind of clipping through, so we can like raise that up a bit, maybe raise that down. We can even smooth and bring that up again. So you get a lot of flexibility, and you can obviously use the cloth brushes if you want and kind of create something a bit more organic. Obviously chainmail is a bit more stiff, so you don't want too many folds. But this is absolutely amazing. I love this. This is so much better than having just textures overlaid on top of a surface. Let's actually try a few more presets and see what we get. Let's go all spiky. Ooh. Amazing. Or let's try maybe different kind of chains. Obviously you need to always like change the scale, and you can also change like how random the scale is, so you get a lot of small chains and big chains. Obviously I don't want that. You can also change the phase, which is basically the rotation. So if you want to like rotate it down a bit more like this. You can also change the randomness of this. Obviously this is not what we want, but I'm sure it has its uses. You can also change the thickness. You can make that thinner. You can make it much thicker if you want. You can also weight paint, so you can choose like where there are chains and where there aren't. So actually let's do that. And let's go into wireframe mode. And if we now start painting, because our weight is set to 0, that means it's gonna completely erase areas like this. But if you set it to 1, you can choose to bring that back, or maybe somewhere in between. So you can like vary the density like this, which is, oh, this is just so cool. So if we press done, this is what we get. So whenever we're done, we can just hit apply MicroMesh. And since this is now its own mesh, we could apply a metal texture. So let's do that. Look at that. Just look at all the information you get from all the lighting that's being cast on it. Isn't that just absolutely amazing? That is so much better than when I tried to like paint in. It's just, oh, I just love this so much. All right, now that we're done talking about the chainmail, let's talk about how to add scales and spikes, for example, to existing armor pieces. So this is an example I've borrowed from Sketchfab. If you don't have the Sketchfab add-on, it's completely free and it's absolutely amazing. Credit goes to Blueprint Games for this model. Anyway, we can go into edit mode and let's choose the surface that we want to kind of have the scales or the spikes on. So with control, I'm just gonna go select a flat surface. There we go, and I'm gonna Shift D, copy it, and press Escape to lock it into the same position, and now press P to separate the selection. If I now go out of edit mode and choose my mesh, we can now convert that into a micromesh. So we can see that the pauldron surface is made up of a lot of triangles, and this doesn't necessarily work the best with MicroMesh. So I'm actually going to try to convert this into quads. So in order to do that, I just select everything and press Alt-J, and that will convert the tris into quads. And we can maybe add in a subdivision surface and leave edit mode and hit apply. If we raise that up a bit, and now hit add micromesh, we can size down the mesh. And how cool is this? Let's actually add in some scales. So let's choose a smaller window. Let's add in the scales, and they're actually rotated the wrong way. So let's try to rotate them down and try to size them up. Oh, I love this. So obviously if you wanted bigger scales, you could have just skipped the subdivision step and just kept them smaller. So actually let's undo that. So subdivision isn't applied. Let's actually cancel that. And now add the micromesh. Select our scales down here. Let's rotate that down. Maybe size them down a bit. And in my opinion, it doesn't look as good, but it still works, you know, from a distance. It still works really well. So let's actually convert this to spikes and see how that looks. So you can do normal spikes, you can do these kind of spikes and kind of choose the direction. Woo! This is funky. Obviously here you'd probably want to subdivide it. So let's actually add in a subdivision. And let's move that to the top. Let's hit apply and then recalculate. And let's decrease the size. Oh yeah. Oh, I just think MicroMesh is so cool. It's just super versatile and just you can be used for so many different things. So let's try a lot of different options. So let's actually reset this. So you can hover over a value and press delete, and that will kind of reset everything. So let's choose this. Let's maybe choose a funky one. So maybe something like this. Let's scale it down. Let's actually bring up the mesh a bit. It's not intersecting so much. That looks so cool. Let's actually try. You can obviously like create a lot of baskets and cages this way. This is just a brilliant way to do that. You can do scale. So you can create a lot of like cool samurai armor this way, for example, because they always have like intricate kind of, not fabric, but I'm not sure what the material is made of, but like all the ropes and all the woven kind of fabric and everything. It's amazing. Oh, that's pretty cool. So honestly, the sky is the limit. You can like tweak around, you can play around with this as much as you want. I just think this is so cool. If I haven't said it like 1,000 times before, I just think this is absolutely amazing. But what if we want to create our own mesh and kind of use that as a micro mesh? Well, it's actually really, really simple. So let's jump to a new empty scene. So if we add in a cube and subdivide that a bunch of times, and now convert that into a micro mesh. There we go. Maybe size that up. So you can obviously hide the source mesh if you just want to have a view of the micromesh. So let's actually create a Suzanne as well and press use as micromesh. We can now choose our original object and just scale that down. And we have an army of Suzannes. You can choose like the different phases, so you can like spin her around. You can obviously vary if you want her big or small, or randomize the rotation. So this is just a great way to kind of populate if you want to go completely crazy. Just create a landscape and size that up. And let's maybe subdivide that landscape and choose to make that a micromesh. You can create some super stylized planets this way, or maybe like a garbage pile by creating like a garbage mesh. I mean, this is pretty demanding on your processor, so I wouldn't maybe recommend this, but I mean, I'm sure it has its uses sometimes. Yeah, honestly, like there is so much flexibility and so much you can do with just like the simple tool, and I'm so excited to use it for my future illustrations. This just is absolutely amazing. Again, if you want this, I will link to the Blender Market and Gumroad page down in the descriptions and pinned comment below. If you have any questions regarding workflow and so on, just please let me know in the comments below, and I'm happy to honestly make a second video on this if you would want that. And I think that marks the end of the video. Hopefully you found this information useful. The format of this video is a bit different. I just kind of wanted to try something new, so let me know if you liked it or if you kind of liked the more edited kind of quick tips videos. Links to previous quick tips videos and the add-ons will be in the description and pinned comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!